On a quiet morning in late November of 2025, emergency services received a call from a paddock in South Australia's southeast. A 65-year-old diver named Gary Gibson had gone into the water with two companions into a flooded limestone cave system. He had personally dived somewhere between 60 and 70 times before. He did not come back out. Less than a week later, the cave he died in was closed. As of this recording, it remains off limits to divers. Tank Cave sits within the same extraordinary network of flooded limestone caves and sinkholes scattered across South Australia's limestone coast. Unlike some of the region's more infamous sites, Tank Cave has never carried the same dark reputation as locations like the Shaft, the sinkhole responsible for the deaths of 4 divers back in 1973. Tank Cave was, by most accounts, within the cave diving community, considered one of the more advanced systems in the region, genuinely challenging but manageable, with depths that allowed for long, carefully planned dives. It has been explored for decades, used specifically for advanced level training through the Cave Divers Association of Australia, and new passages within the system have continued to be discovered even in relatively recent years. Evidence of a site that experienced divers kept returning to precisely because it still had more to offer even after decades of use. Gary Gibson was exactly the kind of diver this site was suited to. According to Grant Pearce, National Director of the Cave Divers Association of Australia, Gibson was personally well known within the organisation, described as a very meticulous diver, fastidious about his gear and his planning, the kind of person who would simply call off a dive entirely if something felt wrong. Pearce's own words afterward captured the genuine confusion surrounding the incident precisely. Everyone involved, he said, was scratching their heads, unable to immediately explain what had actually gone wrong for a diver with that level of caution and that much specific experience at this exact site. South Australia Police's Water Operations Unit led the recovery operation. Gibson's body was ultimately recovered the following day, on the 1st of December, by a team that included police divers alongside experienced cave diving specialists. Among them, Dr. Richard Harris, the Australian anaesthetist who became internationally known for his role in the 2018 Tam Luang cave rescue in Thailand, where he helped save 12 boys and their football coach trapped deep inside a flooded cave system. His direct involvement in Gibson's recovery underscores exactly how seriously the cave diving community treats operations like this, drawing on some of the most experienced people in the world for a recovery. Most ordinary emergency services would have no realistic way of safely conducting themselves. Before we go further, if a story like this makes you want to know more about the Australia hiding just beneath the surface, my ebook, The Timeline Lie, covers 15 real, documented sites like this one across the country, complete with the actual history behind them and where to find them yourself. The parts of this country most of us were simply never taught. In the immediate aftermath, the Cave Divers Association of Australia formally launched its own internal investigation into exactly what happened. A standard, serious process the organisation follows whenever an incident occurs at one of the sites it manages access to. Tank Cave itself was closed to divers in the meantime, while other caves and sinkholes around Mount Gambier, including sites with their own significant histories, have remained open. That distinction matters. This was not a broad, region-wide safety shutdown applied evenly across every cave system in the Limestone coast. It was a specific, deliberate decision to close this particular site, while the investigation works to understand exactly what happened to a diver whose own caution and experience should have made an incident like this considerably less likely. Gibson's death was not, in fact, the first fatality connected to Tank Cave. In 2011, a marine archaeologist and highly respected member of the Australian cave diving community, Agnes Maloka, died during an advanced exploratory solo dive into a new section of the same system. Her death, much like Gibson's, drew genuine shock from within the tightly knit cave diving community, since she too was regarded as an exceptionally skilled, careful diver, not someone whose loss could be easily explained away by simple inexperience or carelessness. If you are finding this as unsettling as I am, make sure you are subscribed, because what connects these two losses, more than a decade apart, says something important about the nature of cave diving itself that rarely gets properly understood by anyone outside the sport. Cave diving is frequently described by the people who actually practice it as an activity where the margin between a perfectly executed dive and a fatal one can come down to a single, small decision made under pressure, in total darkness, at significant depth, with no direct path back to the surface if something goes wrong. Unlike open water diving, where a diver in difficulty can typically just swim straight upward, cave diving offers no such option. The only way out is back the way you came, correctly, calmly, and with enough air remaining to make the return trip. Both Gibson and Maloka were experienced, cautious, well-trained divers operating within a system they knew well. And in both cases, that experience was not enough to prevent a fatal outcome. That reality is precisely why organisations like the Cave Divers Association of Australia exist at all, and why access to sites like Tank Cave is deliberately restricted rather than left open to the general public. Formed in 1973 in direct response to a cluster of fatalities across the Mount Gambier region, during that period, the CDAA introduced a formal site rating and testing system specifically designed to match diver skill level against the genuine difficulty of each individual site, an approach credited with dramatically reducing fatalities across the region in the decades since it was introduced. Tank Cave's classification as an advanced site, restricted specifically to divers who had already demonstrated the skill and experience needed to attempt it safely, reflects exactly that system working as intended. And still, even with every one of those safeguards in place, two experienced, highly rated divers have now died within the same system. What makes Tank Cave's current closure genuinely significant is what it represents about how seriously the diving community treats an incident like this, even when the exact cause remains unclear. This is not a site with a poor safety record being belatedly restricted after years of concern. It is a well-regarded, carefully managed system, closed immediately and deliberately the moment something went wrong. While people with direct personal knowledge of the diver involved openly admit they cannot yet explain what happened. For the wider Mount Gambier region, a landscape already carrying decades of cave diving history, both remarkable and, at times, genuinely tragic, Tank Cave's closure adds another chapter to a story that has never fully settled into either category alone. Not simply a graveyard of past mistakes, and not simply a safely managed recreational site either. Somewhere in between, a genuinely extraordinary underwater landscape that continues to reward the divers skilled enough to explore it properly, while still, on rare and largely unpredictable occasions, taking even the most careful and experienced people it has ever known. As of now, Tank Cave sits sealed off, its most recent chapter still being written by an investigation that has not yet produced an answer. Somewhere beneath that quiet South Australian paddock, the same flooded limestone passages Gary Gibson had explored dozens of times before remain exactly as they were the day he went in, dark, silent, and, for the time being, off limits to anyone else. The broader limestone coast region surrounding Tank Cave carries a genuinely unusual geological history that helps explain why this stretch of South Australia became such a significant hub for cave diving in the first place. The entire area sits on top of an enormous sheet of limestone, gradually dissolved over millions of years by water working its way through the rock, carving out an extensive underground network of caves, sinkholes, and flooded passages stretching across the region. From the surface, many of these sites give almost no visual warning of what lies beneath. A modest, unremarkable dip in an ordinary grazing paddock can open into a chamber large enough to swallow a multi-storey building, filled with water so clear that early divers exploring the region often described visibility extending for tens of metres in every direction. An almost otherworldly environment, sitting directly beneath everyday farmland. That combination, extraordinary visibility paired with genuine physical danger, is part of what has drawn serious cave diving talent to this exact region for more than half a century. Divers from around the world have travelled specifically to South Australia's limestone coast to experience conditions considered close to unmatched anywhere else on the planet. Water clear enough to make an enormous flooded chamber feel almost like open air, layered directly on top of an environment capable of turning a single wrong decision into a fatal one within minutes. Tank Cave earned its reputation as an advanced site precisely because it offered experienced divers genuinely challenging, rewarding terrain to explore, without carrying the same immediately obvious danger signals a site like the Shaft announces from the moment a diver descends into it. The Cave Divers Association of Australia's ongoing investigation into Gibson's death will likely take considerable time to reach any formal conclusion, consistent with how the organisation has handled previous incidents across the region. Investigations of this kind typically involve detailed equipment inspection, careful review of the specific conditions present at the time of the dive, and consultation with the surviving dive partners who were present when the incident occurred. Only once that process has run its full course will the CDAA be in a position to determine whether Tank Cave's closure becomes permanent. whether it reopens under revised protocols, or whether the investigation ultimately concludes the incident resulted from circumstances no reasonable safety measure could have fully prevented. For now, the closure itself stands as its own quiet statement. A site trusted by decades of experienced divers, rated advanced rather than reckless, home to a diver with 60 or 70 previous dives at the exact same location behind him, closed within days of losing him. While the organisation that knows this cave system better than almost anyone else openly admits it does not yet have an answer. The human cost within a community this small and tightly connected is worth sitting with directly as well. Cave diving in South Australia remains a genuinely niche pursuit, drawing a relatively small, dedicated group of divers who tend to know one another well, train alongside each other, and share the same handful of advanced sites across the Limestone coast over years and sometimes decades. Grant Pearce's own description of Gibson, personal, specific, clearly coming from someone who had known him rather than simply reviewing an incident report from a distance, reflects exactly that closeness. When a diver of Gibson's experience and caution is lost, the loss does not stay contained to a single family. It moves through an entire community of people who trusted the same sites, followed the same protocols, and now find themselves reconsidering assumptions about risk they may have carried, largely unquestioned, for years. That reconsideration is, in its own way, precisely what the CDAA's rating system was originally built to manage, continuously testing the relationship between genuine skill and genuine risk, adjusting site access and protocols as new information comes to light. Tank Cave's closure, whatever its ultimate outcome, represents that same system doing exactly the work it was designed to do, treating a single, genuinely inexplicable loss with the seriousness it demands, rather than allowing familiarity with a well-known site to quietly become complacency.